Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about the Legendary Lords of Shadows of Change, for which we have received absolutely no information from Creative Assembly that they are going to get any kind of changes, any kind of fixes with patch 4.2, and they need them. Oh boy, do they need them. Because right now, when you play any of these campaigns, they're not especially great campaigns with the exception of Yuan Bo, and even then he has his own issues. But let's start with the worst campaign of Shadows of Change, the Changeling. Now, the Changeling is a really powerful Legendary Lord. He embodies the very best of Tzeentch, the raw power of Tzeentch's armies, magical power, and just trolling around on the campaign map. So all of that is good. The problem is the way this was implemented. Now, to be fair, the Changeling does have plenty of fixes for many of the fundamental issues Tzeentch has. I've talked about those issues, I've talked about all of these races. So the way the Changeling fixes Tzeentch is like the first research he gets in one turn gives him 10 grimoires, 10 casualty replenishment, and 10 cult supplies. And then he can get global recruitment capacity and local recruitment capacity and get things like teleport sands very quickly in his campaign as opposed to Kairos. Yeah, his research tree is significantly better than the one that Kairos has. It just makes sense. It gives you the things that you want all nightly put together, like army boons are on the left side, unit boons on the right side, things like the changing of ways on the top, winds of magic. All of this is very well put together. In point of fact, it is one of the best research trees in the entire game. But the effects are very substantial. Because with the Changeling, you already have free slots to begin with in your campaign. You can get up to 5. While that isn't quite on the level of Greenskins and Skaven, it is certainly one of the higher levels of local recruitment capacity in the game. And the fact that you start essentially with 10% casualty replenishment, that is just a start, gives you a significant amount of power. But this will only go even further. You get immunity to diplomatic penalties from trespassing, you can establish cults, you don't control territory. It is impossible to lose this campaign. The reason it's impossible to lose this campaign is when your armies are in territory with cults, your armies will be invisible, so the AI won't even detect you. I mean, there are chances, of course, that the AI could detect you, but very, very rarely. So you end up in this position where you end up with Forsaken of Tzeentch, Sangors, just ending up dominating everyone around you. There's very little reason to recruit any army that doesn't look like this, actually. I mean, yes, you can, of course, go with the Beasts of Tzeentch, you can go with the huge amount of army variety, and in point of fact, you have the tools needed to succeed in that. But this is a rather meaningless campaign. It feels like a very gimmicky campaign because you've effectively won from the moment you started. You cannot lose this campaign. Say what you will about Be'lakor, say what you will about any other powerful Legendary Lord. At least the possibility of losing the campaign is there. And it's not even the best troll campaign. You want to look at a good troll campaign? Consider Oxyatel's campaign as an example. I feel that is a much better troll campaign with all his global teleportation. Hell, even Be'lakor. And if you want to play a campaign focused on trolling with diplomacy, the Changeling is not the best one available because he cannot take territory. So he can trade territory, and not being able to trade territory, take and trade territory, so severely limits your diplomatic potential. Because yes, you do have a skill over here that gives you diplomatic relations plus 30 with all factions. You have a building that you can construct in one of these cults. Because what you're basically building are unbreakable undercities that can only be destroyed if they're detected, not if the settlement is destroyed. That's fair enough. I feel that was needed. But when you look at the situation over here, with like diplomacy, yeah, you can get things like 30, and then with buildings, you can get even more. So there is a lot of power from a diplomatic standpoint, but it ends up being so very limited because you cannot do one of the main things that makes diplomacy work: take and trade territory. You do have a much better economy than Kairos, and it's like when you play a Kairos campaign, anyone who wants to argue with me that Kairos has a good economy, no, the Changeling has a good economy. The Changeling's base economic structure goes up to tier 3 and generates 450 income. Now, of course, you need to establish cult, but this is very easy, right? The main limiting factor is not even money in this campaign. Like, it's turn 20. I'm at 30,000. I'm maintaining 2 stacks. The only limiting factor is I'm getting to 3 stacks soon enough. And I'm not going to run out of money in this campaign. Hell, the only limiting factor is the cult supplies. That is it. because you need cult supplies. Like you don't use the growth system, all well and good. I feel more campaigns shouldn't use the growth system, dwarves for instance. But you get this cult supply system, and it's an awful system because the way it works is you have very limited cult supplies until you get a ton of buildings in your campaign that generate cult supplies very, very quickly. And so you end up in a situation, eventually at one point in a campaign, you probably will never have enough cult supplies to build everything you want. Realistically, I've played a Changeling campaign and you do get to that point. But in reality, you will get most of the stuff you need. I mean, you can basically set up all your recruitment center over here in Sterling, and everywhere else you're just building economic buildings and you're building hero capacity buildings, and that is essentially it. Because you have so much recruitment capacity over here that realistically you're never going to run out. You're never going to be in a position where you can't get an army very quickly to the front line. Like just the local recruitment alone. But consider this, make Sylvania another recruitment settlement. Over here the Zufbar took Drakenhof because I sacked it. An annoying factor about the Changelings campaign is you're never taking territory. So you can eliminate factions, you can raise their settlements, but that's such a bad idea because it's not the parasitic buildings that are worth it. Not at all. What is worth it is the mercantile illusion. So the symbiotic buildings are always the ones that are worth building from an economic standpoint. Because guess what? The AI builds a lot and gets a lot. So you look. So for instance, take into consideration Sterling. Sterling at the tier 1 disguise trade from needling, the settlement you first attack, is generating right now at turn 20 230 income. It will go to 479. But keep into consideration over here. Keep in consideration here. Sterling is a minor faction. When you look at these settlements, you're not necessarily going to see a lot. Like it's tier 2 right now. If Sterling gets to tier 3, it's going to generate significantly more money. How much more money? Well, we look at Karl Franz, I'm generating 979 from Altdorf over here. That's the key to your economy. So the Changeling has a vastly better casualty replenishment situation, better recruitment situation compared to Kairos, because he only has 2 to begin with, better research tree, which that research tree that you have is not just giving you 10% casualty replenishment. No. That research tree is getting 20%. Faction 1. Now, 20% is a lot. Siege having barrier and barrier interfering with casualty replenishment, I believe. Not entirely certain about that. But you get 20% casualty replenishment. And we're not finished. Like, this is just the faction, the settlements, the research tree. The biblical level of power the Changeling has is on a different level because they made this, because CA understood, like, with this army, possibly understood that with this army there was never going to be a challenge. So they tried to make it different. They tried to make it an objective-based campaign. So you have these schemes in theaters of war. Now, some of these schemes are annoying. Like, for instance, fighting 15 land battles in the Empire Theater. It's only because I fought Vlad and his infinite hordes of troops that I've come very close to completing this. But to be honest, this is very annoying to do, simply because it can't be battles in a settlement. It has to be land battles, which is frustrating, suffice to say. Or like an objective fight, win 12 battles against the dwarf. So what, am I gonna just sack Zufbar 10 fucking times over and over and over again? But you can't even do that, because let me explain why that is. If you, like us, let's say one turn you establish a cult over a settlement, well, if you show up there to... you only have 2 options over here when you, like, ignore the Autoresolve result there. Because when you take over a settlement, you only have these options. You can set up a trickster cult, you can set up of either symbiotic or parasitic nature, or you can raise a settlement. Now, raising a settlement is generally the worst idea. I mean, you could make an entire empire of dirt if you wanted to, and just build the regular economic structures over here for the sake of the income. It could work, don't get me wrong. But you don't want to raise settlements. But here's the problem. Let's say you set up a cult in a settlement. If I attack this territory again, the only option I'm going to get is basically to just raise it. You can't sack settlements, so it's annoying. Especially when garrisons replenish and your armies might be in a position where they actually have to attack the settlement to even move. it leads to this really frustrating campaign dynamic that you have to deal with when you're playing with the Changeling. And all these wonderful objectives, well, yeah, they give you a lot of power because you can get things like arcane healing. I think you can get to the healing cap, the casualty replenishment cap in a campaign. Like, you look at some of these benefits, you can get things like a chainsword from Scarbrand, you can get more arcane healing, you can get upkeep for armies, for instance. Or if we look at Bretonnia and Laurent, Doom rockets in a campaign. Armor for all armies, diplomatic relations with Beastmen, hilarious. Yeah, that's worth it. Various benefits, various powerful benefits. Now, you're likely not going to do all these schemes, so the idea is supposed to be about choices. The only thing you have to do is deal with the Empire, and realistically, that just means dealing with Festus, because it's very easy to deal with the Empire schemes. Like, all you really need to do in this particular campaign is go deal with Festus, and that is going to certainly be very, very easy. Then infiltrate any settlement with a trickster cult, very easy, and then possibly deal with Vlad, or just sack Altdorf. Might take some time, but regardless, this is very easy, very fast. And after that, you get the choice. Like, you can send a trickster, you can open up a portal to another region, you can open up various rifts to various theaters on the campaign map. In theory, it should be really fun. In practice, it doesn't work because you've got armies that replenish globally really quickly without the need of a hero. And you've got an incredible recruitment benefits on a global level. Your armies, when they're in a region with a cult, are invisible, so you're never risking anything. You will fight a lot of battles because you're not defeating factions in this. You're leaving them. Yes, you're building cults in their settlements, but it's not ideal to erase those settlements. So you end up with factions that, sure, you weaken their armies, but they're still keeping their territory, so they're still gaining a good amount of money. And that means an enormous number of battles. It gets really tiresome because it's not battles that are challenging. There's no challenge. You play a Changeling campaign, you have powerful magic, really powerful line holders, really powerful monstrous units. You simply cannot, in any way, shape, or form, lose this campaign. Actually, you can't. Even if you try to lose this campaign, you will not succeed in that goal. I'll just leave it there. You will fail in losing this campaign because you cannot lose this campaign. Like, I think like the only way you could possibly ever lose this campaign is disband your initial army, don't build any cults over here because you start with one in Flensburg, and then build a bunch of parasitic buildings over here that have this high discoverability, get detected, and maybe if they decide to destroy your buildings over there, you will lose the campaign. Maybe. And I'm not entirely certain that would work either. So that means there's no risk, there's nothing at stake, there's nothing to fight for. It's just gimmicky campaign mechanics. And the problem as well with all of these, you get a bunch of quest battles, it might seem fun and interesting, but nothing meaningful really happens over here. Like, consider this. You get a unique ritual if you go in the Badlands and Southlands, you get a unique ritual to move the Black Pyramid of Nagash. That sounds fun, right? Except the problem of that is, with the Black Pyramid, it just spawns a couple of rogue armies that get obliterated by the AI. You look at Bretonnia and Laurent, with respect to that, the Red Duke will besiege all of Bretonnia with his undead legions. And doesn't end up being meaningful because a lot of these armies are not capable of standing their own against AI. So if you were spawning actual endgame crisis type armies, like if you could create an ultimate Greenskin rebellion over here in the Darklands, that would be one thing, but you don't do so. Instead, you just are playing the gimmicky game. It doesn't feel really satisfying because, like, the Greenskin laborers over here get defeated in 1-2 turns by the time you actually set it up. The most meaningful stuff is, like, maybe in the Empire, or, you go to Cafe, you destroy the Great Bastion. Irrelevant over here. Because it's like, the Kurgan Warband will besiege Cafe. Like, you will need to fight Cafe to defeat them. That's the problem. So, everything here is, like, just feels rather meaningless for the most part in this entire campaign when you're looking at the various benefits. Like a huge rebellion of bloated corpses. Who gives a shit, ultimately? Like, the Norscan one is actually a bit more interesting because you actually have factions that, like, you have the Norscans mass invading Ulfon or Grand Cafe. So maybe combining these two in one could end up working, I suppose. Or Empire Civil War, that's a bit more meaningful. But still, it just doesn't feel... It doesn't necessarily feel all that meaningful. Maybe if you combine the ultimate theater schemes or theater schemes together, like say for instance you really wanted to screw over the High Elves, if you wanted to do so, what you need to do really is send Norska to Ulfwan and then do the Ulfwan schemes, and maybe then you would have some major impact on Ulfwan. Maybe. I stress the part, because I'm pretty certain like Tyrion would win. Like, yes, you can defeat any army that's against you, but you just get so sick and tired of it, because, again, it's not ideal to destroy these factions. It's ideal to weaken them and potentially some of your allies, if you have any, assuming you give a shit about having any. Because, honestly, engaging in diplomacy when a lot of factions hate you, and you don't have the ability of trading territory to them, just feels less useful. And... again, like, you don't really feel like a troll campaign. Oxyatl is a troll campaign. Hell, Bellicor is a better troll campaign. So, for me personally, the Changeling is the worst campaign of the entirety of the Shadows of Change. And he is the centerpiece of this DLC. He's the guy in their trailer. He's the guy that they put a lot of effort on to try and make in this interesting way, but it's just fallen flat on its face. Next up, we have Mother Ostankya. One of the big criticisms that Creative Assembly did get with respect to Forge of the Chaos Dwarves was that they didn't have a variety of starting positions. I always found that particular bit of criticism to be rather weak. I'm not saying Forge of the Chaos Dwarves was perfect, it was not. It had its own issues. It still has its own issues. But complaining that there's not enough campaign diversity was certainly not one of the high points of criticism from my perspective of that. But Creative Assembly did react to that, and as a result of it, we got Mother Ostankya not starting in Kislev, but starting over here in Nagarond, which is as nonsensical as you can get. Now, that would have been one thing, if they were actually interested in having a varied start in a campaign. Maybe it would have worked, maybe it would have been considered a weaker campaign. But then Creative Assembly made that whole thing pointless and just an exercise in frustration by other things that they ended up doing in this campaign. So, Kislev already has significant incentives to go back to Kislev in every campaign. Doesn't matter who you're playing, Boris Ursus, Katrin, Kostaltin, you care about Kislev. Though you don't care about most of Kislev, you just care about the Kislev cities, right? Because Prague, for instance, has this incredible landmark in the Citadel of Prague with global recruitment capacity and global recruitment duration. This is fairly substantial. Or the Lord Hero and Lord Recruit rank. Yeah, tell me how Prague is now worth it in a campaign. Or, for instance, Eregrand. Kislev City itself is actually the least meaningful of the cities, but it's like Erengrad and Prague, very useful. Because you look at Frostholm, you can get light war sleds at tier 3, you can get heavy war sleds, little groms, and hero capacity from Frost Maidens at tier 4. It is a pretty powerful benefit, and Hero and Lord Recruit rank. So having access to these cities of Kislev is already inherently a huge benefit. And they give you an easy way to go back to Kislev with the teleportation for magical forests. What's annoying about this is it takes about 26 turns, 25 turns to get access to Jinx Land. This is one of the major frustrations. This entire top bar and the way you actually unlock it is one of the major frustrations in Ostankya's campaign. But on the subject of Kislev, Creative Assembly went even further on this because they severely limit your unit recruitment and your Patriarch recruitment until you get access to one of these cities of Kislev, which, incidentally, speaking about those cities of Kislev, let me just point out that those cities of Kislev may be very important. Like, you don't need to have an alliance with someone controlling one of those cities, but typically in a Kislev campaign, you'd want to have access to that, right? But still, point is, you care about one of the cities of Kislev, and not starting with virtually the entire unit roster and only having these two building chains. It works. The units you get there, like Giant Spiders and Akshina, along with regular Kossars, will destroy anything in their path. But the problem that I see here is, like, you obviously want these units. Maybe not immediately, but you do want them. The bigger problem is the lack of patriarchs. One of the significant benefits Kislev has in their campaign is casualty replenishment through patriarchs. Patriarchs add a lot of buffs to an army in battle as well. So now having patriarchs does diminish your potential. It means you'll have to fight a lot more battles manually that you know you'd win, but you're doing it because without good casualty replenishment, you're just going to take significant losses. It's not even the Autoresolve. It's just like not being able to recover the losses without good Autoresolve. You can get one patriarch for an event, which is what I did here, but in order to get more, you're going to have to hop onto the Griffinwood, fight Draika, take her forest, take the Ostermark, sell that to Catherine, and get the military alliance with Catherine. Or ignore Catherine and go on Prague, take it over, and then teach Kostalton some manners. Basically, that's it. Also, I find it incredibly stupid that in a Kislev campaign you're encouraged, like Ostankya is encouraged to actually fight the other factions of Kislev, like over here in this campaign. Is there a reason whatsoever for me to not just march on Prague and take it? Sure, I would reduce their level, their settlement level, but beyond that, there is no reason whatsoever why I wouldn't march on Prague, as an example. Or Erengrad. I mean, Kostalton is going to die. I mean, you won't get Kostalton unless you're using the Recruit Defeat the Legendary Lords mod, although you could trigger a rebellion if you wanted to confederate them like that. But still, it is a bad campaign system where you're putting a lord on the other side of the planet, but also making it so that if you're playing her, you want to go back to Kislev. What's the damn point in a diversity in terms of campaign start if you're going to do the same damn thing over and over again? Oh, you can conquer all of Nagaron at the same time. Okay, that's better, I suppose, more diverse than their campaigns. It's funny how Creative Assembly releases DLC for Kislev, who are supposed to be the defenders of North, for a legendary lord that's supposed to embody holding back the forces of chaos, and they put her on the other side of the planet for whatever dumb reason. I feel her campaign would be better if she literally started in the Griffin Wood, and then you had a selection of choices, because you can teleport to every magical forest. You had a bunch of choices where you wanted to go, because hey, you could go and conquer the entirety of Athaloran, you could go to Ulfwan in the Gaian Vale and set up shop there. It would not necessarily be the best option, but sure, you could do it. Or you could go pay a visit to Gorst. And by the way, this is a lot more viable than you might think, because you got the entirety of the Wasteland, you've got the entirety of Temperate and Mountain, so Ostankya could conquer the Darklands if you wanted to. So the choices in this campaign do exist. It's just they made it crap, because you're always going to fight in Nagaron, and then you're always going to teleport in Kislev because you want the Patriarchs at the very least. And this is just only one of the problems. Like, I get the idea of a campaign with more diversity in it, but the way they handle this, it just ended up being weak. But that's just part of the problem, and not necessarily the biggest one either. It is frustrating, it limits your campaign, but all the same. The other annoying thing in this campaign is the invocations and blessings. Now, on their own, the system is not particularly great. The reason is, yes, there are significant buffs in battle that you can gain through the system, but if you're going to go in a battle, and I wish I had an army to show you this here, but if you're going to go in a battle, you're going to have 20 units, let's say going against 20 units. You can have 40 curses and blessings, so what you're going to do is select one of these blessings on each of the 20 units, lords, heroes, that you're going to have in an army, and put them individually on your army, and then if you're fighting and on your opponent, you can do the same. Now, that basically, in a campaign, because of the way Kislev's armies work in general, you don't fight a lot of opponents that are necessarily worth fighting. Like, Akshina decimate everything that stands in their path. Akshina giant spiders will destroy Morathi. But with those few threats, like Morathi's main army, for instance, or let's say Draika's main army, what you do is you save all those blessings and curses, and you put them on all the units in both your army and the enemy army. So that makes it really tedious, that system itself. Also, you have to craft these, but you craft them every single turn. As people have noted, this is a vastly inferior version of Grom's Cauldron, because Grom has these kind of effects, but they're faction-wide effects, as opposed to individual freaking units. I think if it was like based on unit type, so for instance, if I was to go into battle over here, maybe I would have to put an individual blessing on each of my heroes, But then I could put one blessing on my Akshina, one blessing on my giant spiders, one blessing on my incarnate elemental beast. That would be a vastly superior system than the rubbish we have. And you can say, oh, just ignore it. No, you can't. You can't. Every turn of your campaign, beyond the frustration of having to do that for battles manually, but every turn of campaign, what you're doing is you're going here, you're crafting whatever is available, and you're not even interested in the effect. You're interested in maximizing the output that you actually get over here. So, for instance, here I kind of screwed up. You're interested in maximizing the output of blessings and curses from incantations for no other reason than the top of our abilities here, the campaign abilities like removing corruption, disabling movement, teleporting to a magical forest, gaining income, or creating an army of elemental beasts, basically. All of that to unlock, you are required to spend spirit essences by using learned hexes, which are the top abilities, or creating witch hunt incantations. Not using them, creating them. This is frustrating because it means every turn you're spending this and you don't care, you just maximize the output. And you're using these abilities without any regard for if they're useful or not. You're just using them on cooldown because you want to unlock things like income or the army and complete your campaign. It's such a bad system. It's so horrible and tedious and annoying and frustrating. I've played an entire Ostankya campaign. I decimated everyone that stood in my path. But while the Changeling will do so, the Changeling, yeah, he might have some bugged schemes, but I didn't mention that necessarily on him, but a lot of those schemes in the Theater of War, they're bugged as well. Remember that. But Ostankya, she's genuinely frustrating to deal with because you don't care what she's offering, you just want to unlock more shit. And once you're done unlocking more stuff, it's just the tedium of having to craft these again and again and again. Grom's Cauldron works because you just click a freaking button. You put the ingredients you want, click a button, and that's it. For several turns, that's it. If you might want to switch it out from turn to turn, you're doing it dependent on the situation you're dealing with. Encounter a powerful army, maybe switch out the cooking recipe to deal with that army. If you're going to go against High Elves, you might want something else than when you're going against Bretonnia, for instance. That's just an example. It has its own issues. The fact that you're fighting battles against certain factions just get certain ingredients, which is annoying to be certain, like, oh, I need to sack the Empire for good benefit. That's frustrating in Grom's campaign. But you can get ingredients in Grom's campaign through another mechanic, through the hag, the cooking hag, that does appear. She can literally sell ingredients, so you don't even need to do that. Unlike Ostankya, who has to actually unlock a lot of these parts by either forming an alliance or defeating a Lizardman army in battle, for instance, or ogres, or all this kind of stuff, right? Tomb Kings. What the fuck is gonna... Like, I'm just gonna teleport to Orion's camp, or whatever the name is. I'm just gonna teleport Orion's camp. I'm just gonna teleport over here to fight Cetra. Just for a piece of him, basically. What a stupid system. Again, Grom's Cauldron works better because you can unlock a lot of these things just normally. I mean, yes, you have Katep, I know. Katep and Wolf and Nagron. Yes, you can form an alliance and get it through that. But it's such a gimmicky system, I'll be honest, having to unlock a lot of this stuff. By the way, fun fact, Tomb King's rounds of cast, just mentioning that, yeah. Can anyone explain that aspect to me? But still, it's just a really gimmicky, limited system that doesn't work very well in a campaign. It's frustrating, it's annoying, and this entire campaign ends up being frustrating and annoying beyond the inherent issues of Kislev with their limited economy that makes it even more annoying. This campaign is worse than Boris Ursus from my perspective because Boris Ursus has a much stronger economy. Ostankya might have a powerful army, but Kislev's problem is not in their powerful armies or lacking a powerful army. Kislev's problem is maintaining an economy to afford all of that. Guess what? This is one of the chief issues Ostankya has. Akshina might sound great until you realize that they're as expensive as Streltsy, and maintaining them will literally bankrupt you. That is no joke. Like over here, 226, I'm maintaining 3 armies. You might think, oh, these are great armies. Surely they should bankrupt you. I want to point out the amount of territory I have over here, and I'm going bankrupt. That is an issue. It does affect her campaign. It does affect how good this campaign is going to be. And it really, like, what pisses me off about this campaign, the issues that have been with Kislevs and their limited economy, the inherent problems, they've been known since day one. And Creative Assembly did absolutely nothing with this campaign to fix any of that. Say what you will about the Changeling or Yuan Bo, they did improve things. Like, Yuan Bo and the Changeling are much better campaigns, or at least more powerful campaigns than Kairos. And yes, I would say the Changeling is a much better campaign than that piece of crap Kairos Fate Weaver. Ostankya is not a better campaign. She's the only legendary lord in the DLC for a very long time that when she came, that she was inferior to play compared to the others of her own race. Or she's inferior to play compared to Protossx. Castalton and Catherine are worse because of the supporter system limitation. But take that away, if they weren't so limited, I would also say that, yeah, Castalton is a better campaign than Ostankya, if not for the fucking supporter system. And you might think, oh, removing invocations is a great system, and having blessings and curses. Yeah, invocations give you a massive economic benefit if you're playing as Protossx. That is a problem. Now, if it would be one thing if, you know, years down the line in another game, which is what has happened for some DLC lords, it would be another thing in another game where they ended up being inferior, because right now Grimgor is the best greenskin, not Grom. But when Grom came out, yeah, he was the best by far at that time. Things have changed since then, but Ostankya, she is not the best Kislev legendary lord. So it's just like, you don't have the economic potential, and oh, you get to debuff enemies, or you can do trolly things, and this is kind of funny because she actually has better troll mechanics than the Changeling. The Changeling trolls on a campaign level. Ostankya stops an enemy army dead in its tracks and wipes them out. Or she teleports Draika in the middle of Cafe, for instance. Or teleports Malekith in the middle of Gorst's territory. That is hilarious. That is funny, I admit, but that's about it. That's kind of all that this campaign has to offer. Everything else, just really lacking. It would be nice if her Hag Witches had Siege Attacker and Wall Breaker ability. That would make them useful. That would actually help one of the major issues that Kislev does have in its roster, but they don't. Like, if Hag Witches had Wall Breaker, so you could have an artillery piece at tier 3, as a hero, to be certain, but still. So you can have an artillery piece at tier 3, that would be great, but we don't have that. Hopefully, that's one of the things I would like to see added in. As for everything else, yeah, just start her over here in the Griffin Wood and move Draika somewhere else. I don't care where Draika is moved. She could start in near Nordland over here and have her bully Midland and Kazrak, poor Kazrak. But you could start Draika over here in the forest. I'm not even going to try that. It's a really awkward name to pronounce. Or it doesn't matter. You could start Draika in the Forest of Gloom. You could start Draika anywhere the hell you want. It's Draika. She's going to be a powerhouse regardless of where you start her. Ostankya starting near Kislev or in the Ostermark and fighting the Empire would actually make a lot more sense than you might think in this campaign. Because, well, and actually quite a few in the final battle she is actually fighting the Empire for some reason. I have no idea why. But still. Just frustration that we're seeing, like frustration playing this campaign, frustration from the systems that this campaign has, just the interaction with the systems alone, like regardless of the power dynamic or bugginess or all that, no, just the interaction of having to start every turn again and again and going to witch huts and crafting 5 blessings, 5 curses, or however many there is every single turn is not fun. Like, regardless of everything else I've said, that alone ruins this campaign. And finally, there is Yuan Bo. Out of the campaigns of Shadows of Change, Yuan Bo has the best campaign out of all of them, because it is the one that meshes the best with the way Warhammer 3 Immortal Empire plays, and this is something that Creative Assembly should bear in mind when designing future DLC, that when you're building a Legendary Lord, you gotta consider how people are playing Immortal Empires, in particular. Forget Realms of Chaos. Realms of Chaos is dead and buried and should stay like that. They shouldn't put any effort whatsoever about how to make a Lord work well within Realms of Chaos. They should focus about Immortal Empires. From my perspective, I'm not saying Realms of Chaos couldn't have any redemption, but it would take a lot of effort and a significant rework of the map for that to work. But regardless, Yuan Bo just works well, because he's just basically a regular Kefean campaign that is substantially better. He's got more effects when matters of state, he has more climate possibilities because he can take the jungle, and he starts in the jungle. See, one of the big problems in a Kefean campaign is you fight over Kefei and that's pretty much it. There's nothing more to it. Well, in a Yuan Bo campaign, there's a heck of a lot more to it because you got the entirety of Lustria to fight over and then the entirety of the Southland. So basically, when you're playing this campaign, you're always going to have territory with good climate to expand towards too. That is a problem if you're playing a campaign as Xiao Ming or Miao Ying, which is something I believe should be changed in their campaigns. Like maybe Xiao Ming could have Mountain, maybe Miao Ying could have Cast Wasteland, just a particular perspective on that subject. But regardless, Yuan Bo does have better climate, and he has a significant amount of strength in his campaign. So all of that works well. Now, what are the issues specifically to his campaign unrelated to the broader issues of Kefei? Because I've talked about the broader issues of Kefei, the lack of casualty replenishment, the compass, etc. Well, one of the issues is that his campaign start is just annoying. It's a limited start, so you basically start with no barracks, which is actually a bit odd for a campaign. So you start with no barracks, you start with 3 settlements, but 2 of them are in a ruined state. So you start with the port settlement that has no port in it. You start with the floating pyramid that is a wreck. This is not really a great campaign start. By the way, pro tip, if you're playing this game on Legendary, Vanilla, Autoresolve that first battle, get the campaign movement range over here, for instance, increase mobility on that, and just move to the edge. Don't even force march it. Although, if you want to ensure it happens, force march, and this army will almost certainly attack you. You can defeat this army. It's not the difficult battle, even in force march, and that way you'll eliminate the greenskins. But it's such a weird start. You start with 3 greenskin armies very close to each other. You start with 3 settlements all tier 1 with no buildings in them. It's just really odd, I'll be honest. And it's also not great in another way. While you have more climate possibilities, the jungle is not my favorite climate because it's so slow to navigate it. And that is one of the issues. You're playing a very slow-paced campaign. In some ways, at least in terms of conquering a lot of territory in Lustria. In Kefei, you can conquer Kefei just as quickly as everyone else. In point of fact, you might even do it faster than Xiao Ming because you can just take the Celestial Riverlands and then march on Snitch. By that point, you should have enough Jade Warriors and Jade Warrior crossbowmen that he won't be able to stop you. And because so much of his recruitment and economic potential comes from Singpo, it is fairly easy enough to deal with Snitch. Well, fairly easy. If he ambushes you with 2 stacks, you're finished. But outside of that, it is fairly easy. But this limitation of a start means it takes multiple turns to get into the same position that Xiao Ming and Miao Yin have. Because they have Jade Warrior recruitment from the very beginning. Because they can get Jade Warrior crossbowmen earlier. So in a short campaign, Xiao Ming and Miao Ying actually are better to play than Yuan Bo. I mean, granted, Yuan Bo can deal with Snitch, can unify Kefei, and can take over all of Lustria, obviously. So that is a benefit. I'd say his campaign is better from the long term, but long campaigns are not particularly great in Warhammer 3. Just the dynamics of Immortal Empires make it so. I mean, you might say, well, you get rush construction and levy the provinces, so that can work. Yeah, but again, not starting with Jade Warriors is just one of those limiting factors that kind of makes this campaign less interesting to play. And you do have these extra compass directions, but they're just so frustrating to deal with because they take so long to unlock. There's no reason in a Kefein campaign to ever go for anything other than Great Bastion or Celestial Lake. Now, for Yuan Bo, supposedly, you do have the Nongchang Basin. The other directions are meaningless, like, ooh, I want a recruit rank. No, I want 15% economic benefit. Oh, attrition immunity and immortal characters. Don't care. Winds of magic benefit. Meaningless. Compared to 15% economic potential, yeah, the compass is not a great system. But what about the Nongchang Basin? Well, sure. You just need to march over you just need to march from here to here, take the settlement, and don't ignore the fact that it's actually in your best interest to deal with Masmundi as quickly as possible for another compass direction. Keep in mind your campaign victory conditions do require you to get 2 of these astronomic relays, so it's actually in your best interest to deal with Masmundi first, then march south, maybe pacify Morathi in some way, shape, or form, maybe wipe out Marafi and sell her territory to Ostankya, because you don't want to piss off Wolf One if you're playing this campaign, because yeah, the territory over here is not great for you. Wolf One is decent enough, I suppose, but still. You do have a lot of power, but campaign campaigns are over within 20 turns. It is an interesting dynamic to be dealing with, having to build everything from scratch, I suppose. It is frustrating at the same time. My issue with this campaign is just a lot of the systems just feel gimmicky. Like, oh yeah, get matters of state, you feel get more compass options, you get more climate. That's great. All of that in theory is great, but am I actually forced in this campaign to make any kind of interesting decisions? Not quite. I mean, your Jade Warriors and Jade Warrior Crossbowmen will obliterate every opponent you face early on, so all the new units, all the new stuff Kebie is getting is just redundant. I guess this is a bigger problem in the way Immortal Empires campaigns are played and the dynamics of Immortal Empires, rather than any particular issue of Yuan Bo. For what it is worth, he is the best Legendary Lord of Kebie. He has the best campaign overall of Kebie. But I've tried playing this campaign, like I've finished this campaign of course, but I've tried numerous times. It just gets really boring after turn 20, 30 at most. You could say the same for many campaigns in the game, to be certain, but I just feel it's lacking from my perspective. To be fair, I would much sooner replay this campaign than ever play Ostankya and the Changeling again, so it is the best campaign of the DLC. But compared to, like, I think back to when the Cast Wars were released, their campaigns were fun. I think back, not Champions of Chaos, but think of Silence and the Fury. Think of the Sisters of Twilight, for instance, and Fraught. Think of before that, I think Queen and the Crone. Think all the DLCs that came out in Warhammer 2. Warden and Podge, Twisted and Twilight, Silence and Fury in particular, Queen and the Crone, Prophet and Warlock. When those campaigns came out, they were worth playing. I really don't feel that, which has a change. Say what you will about Forge the Castdorfs, for all its issues, it did feel like it was worth playing quite a bit. Sure, Drazif is my favorite, and I've played far less of Zaytan, though Zaytan was actually the first campaign I finished as the Castdorfs, and I've played a decent amount of Astrogoth, and it wasn't a horrible experience with those. With Shadows of Change and going forward with future DLC, now hopefully Creative Assembly makes these campaigns more interesting. For Yuan Bo, it's more the issues like he just starts with tier 1 settlements. I think if he started with like the Isle of the Crimson Skull or Shangwu as a tier 2 settlement, if one of these started as a tier 2 settlement, this would be better. And in the long term, I'm not sure. Like long term, I think it's more of an issue of the jungle situation than anything particular in his campaign. Like his campaign is not broken. Casualty replenishment, like any issue I can attribute to Yuan Bo is an issue Kebie has. Like with the Changeling and Ostankya, yeah, they have their own personal issues. The Changeling being all over the place. Ostankya having a frustrating campaign dynamic in general. Yuan Bo is just more weighed down by the issues Kebie has. The casualty replenishment. Also, can I just mention that I'm really frustrated with Creative Assembly doing this bullshit where they removed the ability of getting vision if you're playing a high elf campaign. They removed the ability of you getting vision for a trade agreement, but they added it back to Yuan Bo. Yeah, CA, can we talk about you removing features from an entire race in the game just to sell your DLC in a better way? Now, people said, people are saying that CA wanted to do that regardless. Yeah, I'm not buying that. I don't care what statement is out there. I am not buying it at all. By the way, that really does actually screw over high elven campaigns. That just feels so cheap, and we know why they did this. Like, you can ignore this, you can pretend that CA didn't do it for this reason, but I think anyone who's seen gaming companies for many years now, if you're telling me that you trust gaming companies to do this for a reason, no. They cut out a feature for an entire race to present their DLC in a better way. That's what they did over here with that trade agreement situation. And I'm not saying this because it's an issue with Yuan Bo. I'm saying it because I am sick and tired of gaming companies doing this shit over and over again. And you know they're doing it. You know they want to do it again and again. You know they want to pull this off, and it is disgusting. Like, honestly, like, it's gotten to the point like the gaming industry as a whole is just disgusting. Like, I get it. I get it. You look at games that sell a lot of copies or make tons of money and you want to dip into that honeypot yourself. So, guess what? And I make this point in general about the gaming industry. Guess what? The companies who make that money, they do so for a reason. And with respect to Total War, I am sorry, Total War is not Blizzard. It's not EA. Like, say what you will about Electronic Arts or Call of Duty or Activision or Blizzard or anything like that. They get away with this shit for a reason. And even they are not necessarily getting away with it. Creative Assembly doing this kind of crap, yeah, it might be that they finally learned the lesson. But like when you see this kind of stuff, like them literally removing a feature from one race and then adding it for a Legendary Lord for a paid DLC, the most expensive in their history, that just leaves a really, really bad taste. I don't care about what patch notes said in the past. I don't care what statements might have existed in the past. They did it with SOC's release. They implemented it. And we know why they did it. That's the thing that I dislike immensely about that. That rant aside, yeah, Yuan Bo is the most playable of the campaigns. Kebie could use some improvements, casualty replenishment, hopefully the new hero adds that. The compass directions are meaningless, the entire campaign victory conditions are meaningless, and navigating the jungle is not that great, but it is a playable campaign. It is a good campaign if you're willing to tolerate a lot of the inherent issues of Lustra and Kebie. But it isn't a campaign that's broken because the Legendary Lord is badly designed. For what he is very well designed, in fact. And he has campaign systems that fit within Immortal Empires very well. Even if he literally stole the trade secrets from the High Elves. Costin, signing out.